Best friends for Frances. It was a pleasant summer morning, so Frances took her bat and her ball and some chocolate sandwich cookies and went outside. Will you play ball with me? Frances's little sister Gloria called to her as she was leaving. No, said Frances, you are too little. Gloria sat down on the back steps and cried. Frances walked over to her friend Albert's house, singing a little song. Sisters that are much too small to throw or catch a bat or a ball are really not good at all, except for crying. When Frances got to Albert's house, he was just coming out, and he was carrying a large, heavy-looking paper bag. Let's play baseball, said Frances. I can't, said Albert. Today is my wandering day. Where do you wander? Said Frances. I don't know, said Albert. I just go around until I get hungry, and then I eat my lunch. That looks like a big lunch, said Frances. It's nothing much, said Albert. 4 or 5 sandwiches and some apples and bananas, and 2 packages of cupcakes and a quart of chocolate milk. Can I wander with you? Asked Frances. I only have one lunch, said Albert. I'll bring my own, said Frances. I'll run home and get it right away. No, said Albert. I think I better go by myself. The things I do on my wandering days aren't things you can do. Like what? Said Frances. Catching snakes, said Albert. Throwing stones at telephone poles. A little frog work, maybe. Walking on fences. Whistling with grass blades. Looking for crow feathers. I can do all that, said Frances. Except for the work and the snakes. That's what I mean, said Albert. I'd have to ruin the whole day showing you how. I'll see you tomorrow. Then Albert went off to wander, and Frances walked slowly home with her bat and ball, singing, Fat boys that eat too much lunch can't do a thing but munch and crunch and play with snakes and frogs. When Frances got home, Gloria said, Will you play ball with me now? You can't bat and you can't catch, said Frances, and you can't throw either. I can if you stand close, said Gloria. All right, said Frances, and she played ball with Gloria. The next morning, when Frances went to Albert's house, Albert was playing ball with his friend Harold. Can I play? Said Frances. She's not much good, said Harold to Albert, and besides, this is a no-girls game. Can't I play? Said Frances to Albert. Well, it is a no-girls game, said Albert. All right, said Frances. Then I will go home and play a no-boys game with my sister Gloria, Mr. Fat Albert, so ha ha ha. Frances walked home, and as she walked she sang, boys to throw and catch and bat are all the friends that Mr. Fat Albert will have from now on. He will not have me. When Frances got home, Gloria said, How did you play so fast that you are home so soon? It was a fast game, said Frances. You're lucky that you have a friend to play with, said Gloria. I wish I had a friend. I thought Ida was your friend, said Frances. Ida is away at camp, said Gloria. And when she is here, she only wants to play dolls or tea party. She never wants to catch frogs or play ball. Can you catch frogs? Said Frances. I use father's old bat, said Gloria. Shall I show you how? Later, said Frances. Do you want to play ball? All right, said Gloria. If any boys come, they can't play, said Frances, and I think I will be your friend now. How can a sister be a friend? Said Gloria. You'll see, said Frances. For frogs and ball and tea parties and dolls? Said Gloria. Yes, said Frances. And will you show me how to print my name? Said Gloria. And tell me what the letters and numbers say when I make letters and numbers? Yes, said Frances. Then you will be my best friend, said Gloria. Will it be just today or longer? Longer, said Frances, and today we are going to do something big with no boys. What? Said Gloria. We will have an outing, said Frances, and there will be a picnic and songs and games and prizes. Mother helped Francis and Gloria get everything ready and packed in Francis's wagon. Then Francis and Gloria went off to the outing. In the wagon was a picnic lunch in a hamper. There was also 2 burlap sacks for the sack race, an egg for the egg toss, and a jar with 2 frogs in it that Gloria had caught for the frog jumping contest, and there were balloons and lollipops for prizes. Francis had made a sign to carry on the outing, too. It said, "Best Friends Outing. No boys." Francis and Gloria held the sign high as they passed Albert's house, and Francis sang, "When best friends have an outing, there are jolly times in store. When there are games and prizes, there is also something more. There is something in a hamper that is very good to eat. When best friends have an outing, it's a very special treat with no boys." "What's in that hamper?" asked Albert as he came running out of his house. "I don't know," said Francis. "Nothing much. Hard-boiled eggs and whole fresh tomatoes, carrot and celery sticks. There are some cream cheese and chive sandwiches, I think, and cream cheese and jelly sandwiches, too, and salami and egg and pepper and egg sandwiches, coleslaw and potato chips, of course, ice-cold root beer, packed in ice, and watermelon and strawberries and cream for dessert. And there are other things I forget, like black and green olives and pickles, and popsicles, and probably some pretzels and things like that. And there are salt and pepper shakers, and napkins, and a checkered tablecloth, which is the way girls do it." "Could I come along on the eating?" said Albert. "You mean outing," said Francis. "Outing, I mean," said Albert. "Could I come along? That wagon looks very heavy to pull, and you will probably get all tired out unless I help you." "I don't know," said Francis. "You can see from the sign that this is a no boys outing, and it is only for best friends." "What good is an outing without boys?" said Albert. "It is just as good as a ball game without girls," said Francis, "and maybe a whole lot better." "Can't I be a best friend?" asked Albert. "I don't think it is the kind of thing you can do," said Francis, "and it would ruin my whole day to have to explain it to you." "I can do it," said Gloria. "I can be a best friend, and I can catch frogs, too." "I can catch frogs and snakes," said Albert. "Let him be a best friend," said Gloria, "and he can show me how to catch snakes." "I'll get my snake pillowcase right now," said Albert. "Well, I'm not sure," said Francis. "Maybe you'll be best friends when it is goodies in the hamper time, but how about when it is no girls' baseball time?" "When we are best friends, there won't be any no girls' baseball," said Albert. "All right," said Francis, and she crossed out the no boys on the sign. Then they started off again. Albert pulled the wagon to the outing place where Francis and Gloria walked ahead with the sign. The outing place was at the maple tree on the hill by the pond. Everybody had a good time there. First, Albert caught a snake for Gloria, and then they played games. Gloria won the sack race. Francis won the egg toss, and Albert won the frog jumping contest with a fresh frog he caught right here in the pond. So everybody won a prize. Then Francis made up a party song, and everybody sang it. "When the wasps and the bumblebees have a party, nobody comes that can't buzz. When the chicks and the ducklings have an outing, everyone has to wear fuzz. When the frog and the snake have the yearly clam bake, there's plenty wiggling and hopping. They splash in the pond and the marshes beyond, and everyone has to get sopping." "And at the best friends outing," said Albert, "everyone has to eat, don't they?" "Yes," said Francis and Gloria, and they opened the hamper. "Maybe we packed too much," said Francis. "I'm not sure we can eat it all." "That is what best friends are for," said Albert, as he quickly spread the tablecloth. "I will help you finish it all." That is what Albert did, and when the picnic was over, the hamper was not heavy at all. "I call that a good outing," said Albert, and he gave Francis and Gloria a ride in the wagon while he pulled it all the way home. The next morning Albert came over with a bunch of daisies for Frances. "What are the daisies for?" said Frances. "Well," said Albert, "we are best friends now, and I am a boy, so that makes me your best boy friend, and that is why I brought you daisies." "Thank you," said Frances. Then Gloria sat down on the steps and cried. "Why are you crying?" said Frances. "Because now that you have Albert to be your best boy friend, and bring you flowers and play ball with," said Gloria, "and you won't be my best friend any more." "Yes, I will," said Frances, "and besides, I am not sure that I'm going to let Albert be my boy friend." "Then let him be mine," said Gloria. "Not so fast," said Frances. "It was only yesterday that you got to be big enough to play baseball. But I will give you half the daisies Albert gave me." So Frances gave Gloria half the daisies, and Gloria stopped crying. Then Harold came over, and everybody played baseball. Gloria, too. The end. Mercy Watson, something wonky this way comes. Mr. Watson and Mrs. Watson have a pig named Mercy. Mr. Watson, Mrs. Watson, and Mercy live together in a house on 54 Decawoo Drive. One Saturday afternoon, Mr. Watson said to Mrs. Watson, "My darling, my dear, there's a movie at the Bijou called When Pigs Fly." "When Pigs Fly?" said Mrs. Watson. "What an inspiring title. Mercy, did you hear?" Mercy did not hear. Mercy did not hear because Mercy was not listening. "It says here that the Bijou proudly serves real butter," said Mr. Watson. "Oh, my," said Mrs. Watson. "Real butter?" Mercy pricked up her ears. She was listening now. Mercy loved butter. She particularly loved butter on hot toast, but she would take butter any way she could get it. "Yes," said Mr. Watson, "it says here that the Bijou proudly serves real butter on every bottomless bucket of popcorn." "Bottomless?" said Mrs. Watson. "Bottomless," said Mr. Watson, "which means all you can eat." "All you can eat?" said Mrs. Watson. "What a delightful concept." Mercy thought that all you could eat was a very delightful concept. "Let's go to the movies," said Mr. Watson. "Let's," said Mrs. Watson. "Oink," said Mercy. "Where are you going?" said Baby Lincoln. "We're off to the movies," said Mr. Watson. "Oh," said Baby, "what movie are you going to see?" "It is a movie called When Pigs Fly," said Mrs. Watson. "Is it a romance?" said Baby. "Is it a movie about love?" "Well," said Mrs. Watson, "I think it is basically a movie about pigs flying." "Don't be ridiculous," said Eugenia Lincoln. "Pigs don't fly. It's a figure of speech." "What's a figure of speech?" said Mr. Watson. "The movie title," said Eugenia, "is a figure of speech signifying the impossible." "Well," said Mrs. Watson, "we are going to be impossibly late if we don't get going." "Would you care to join us?" said Mr. Watson. "Yes," said Baby Lincoln. "Absolutely not," said Eugenia Lincoln. "Oh, sister," said Baby, "please say yes." "No," said Eugenia, but she got into the Watsons' convertible anyway. "Where are you going?" shouted Stella. "We're off to the movies," said Mr. Watson. "What kind of movie are you going to see?" said Frank. "It's a romance," said Baby. "It will be inspirational," said Mrs. Watson. "It's a figure of speech," shouted Eugenia. "Is it a movie with a happy ending?" said Frank. "Oh, it must end happily," said Mrs. Watson. "Can we come too?" said Stella. "The more the merrier," said Mr. Watson. Police Officer Tamelio had the night off. Officer Tamelio was at the Bijou Drive-In. He was with his wife, Mrs. Officer Tamelio. They were in the front row. "Is it nice to have a night off from the relentless duties of keeping the world safe from crime?" Officer Tamelio asked himself. "It is very nice," he answered himself. It is very nice. Mrs. Officer Tamilio smiled. Mrs. Officer Tamilio patted Officer Tamilio's arm. Animal Control Officer Francine Pullet was at the Bijou Drive-In too. Animal Control Officer Francine Pullet was with Alfred P. Tompkins. Alfred P. Tompkins and Francine Pullet were on a date. "Do you think that there will be actual pigs in this movie?" said Francine Pullet. "I'm not certain," said Alfred P. Tompkins. "As an animal control officer," said Francine Pullet, "I have found pigs to be the wiliest clients of all." "Really?" said Alfred. "Absolutely," said Francine. "Although I did catch a pig once, at least. I think I caught a pig." "Fascinating," said Alfred P. Tompkins. "Simply fascinating." He put his arm around Francine Pullet. Leroy Ninker was a small man with a big dream. Leroy Ninker wanted to become a cowboy, but for now Leroy was working at the Bijou Drive-In concession stand. Leroy Ninker was selling bottomless buckets of popcorn. "Yippee-i-o!" he shouted. "There's nothing faux. That's right, it's real butter, folks. Top quality, bottomless, and out of this world. Yippee-i-o!" In between pouring butter and popping popcorn, Leroy Ninker worked on his lasso skills. He twirled the lasso. He made the lasso whistle. He lassoed a bottomless bucket. He lassoed a stool. "Yippee-i-o!" sang Leroy. "There's nothing faux about my skill with a lasso." The Watson convertible pulled up to the Bijou ticket window. "Help you?" said the ticket seller, Beatrice Lipoloni. "We are here to see when pigs fly," said Mr. Watson. Beatrice Lipoloni took her glasses off. She put her glasses back on. She blinked. Pardon me and all," said Beatrice Lipoloni, "but I'm seeing things kind of wonky. Is that a pig in the back seat of your vehicle?" "Her name is Mercy," said Mr. Watson. "She is our darling, our dear," said Mrs. Watson. "I'm not sure pigs are allowed at the Bijou," said Beatrice Lipoloni. "Actually," said Mr. Watson, "she is a porcine wonder. Do you allow porcine wonders?" "Porcine wonders?" said Beatrice Lipoloni. "Yes," said Mr. Watson. Beatrice Lipoloni blinked. "I don't think there are any rules against porcine wonders," she said. "Excellent," said Mr. Watson. "Good evening to you, then." Beatrice blinked again. She adjusted her glasses. "Wonky," said Beatrice Lipoloni. "Wonky in the extreme." Mercy put her snout up in the air. She sniffed. There was a wonderful smell. There was an incredible smell. The wonderful, incredible smell was everywhere. The wonderful, incredible smell was butter. Mr. Watson said, "I think it's time for a bottomless bucket. Frank, why don't you and I go and get some treats for the ladies?" At the concession stand, the little man behind the counter said, "Yippee-i-o! What do you know?" "Hey," said Mr. Watson, "you're the man who robbed us." "Robbed you?" said Frank. "Yes," said Mr. Watson. "You tried to take our toaster." "My name is Leroy Ninker," said the little man. "You're a thief," said Frank. "Reformed," said Leroy. "I'm a reformed thief studying to be a cowboy." "Well, good for you, Leroy," said Mr. Watson, "but we would like several bottomless buckets." "Butter on those buckets?" said Leroy. "We would like a great deal of butter on those buckets," said Mr. Watson. "Yippee-i-o!" said Leroy. "That's the way to go." The smell of butter was absolutely everywhere. The smell of butter was driving Mercy wild. Where was the butter smell coming from? Mercy thought she would go and investigate. She leaped out of the convertible. She moved with purpose. Was there anything more heavenly than being hot on the trail of a true butter smell? Mercy did not think so. She trotted faster. Mercy Watson was a pig on a mission. "Hey now," said Alfred P. Tompkins. "Speaking of pigs, isn't that a pig right there?" "Where?" said Francine Poulet. "There," said Alfred P. Tompkins. He pointed at the pig that was trotting past the truck. The pig had its snout up in the air. The pig looked very happy. "That," said Francine Poulet, "is the pig from Deckawoo Drive. I have dealt with that pig before." "I wonder what a pig is doing at the movies," said Alfred P. Tompkins. "That's a good question," said Francine. "That's the kind of question that only an animal control officer can answer." "Fascinating," said Alfred P. Tompkins. "Don't make any sudden movements," said Francine. She reached into the back of her truck. She grabbed her net. "If you want to see an animal control officer in action," said Francine Poulet, "follow me." "Fascinating," said Alfred P. Tompkins. "Simply fascinating. I'm right behind you." Mercy stopped. She sniffed. The smell of butter was very strong. The smell of butter was very near. The smell of butter was coming from the back seat of a station wagon. Mercy stuck her head in the window. She sniffed again. The smell of butter was coming from an extremely large bucket in the hands of a very small child. Mercy helped herself. The small child screamed, "Papa! Papa! A monster is eating my popcorn!" Mercy chewed. The popcorn was drenched in butter. It was delicious. A man stuck his face in Mercy's snout. "What do you think you're doing?" the man said. What did Mercy think she was doing? She thought she was enjoying a buttery snack. "Get out of here!" shouted the man. He gave Mercy a very forceful shove. Popcorn went flying everywhere. Mercy thought that perhaps it was time to move on. In the front row of the Bijou Drive-In, Officer Tamilio sat straight up in his seat. Officer Tamilio said, "Did you hear that?" Mrs. Officer Tamilio said nothing. "Was that a scream of distress?" said Officer Tamilio. "It sounded like a scream of distress," he answered himself. "Is someone in trouble?" Officer Tamilio asked. Mrs. Officer Tamilio said nothing. "It is very possible that someone is in trouble," Officer Tamilio answered himself. "Is it time for an officer of the law to step in?" Officer Tamilio asked. "Most definitely," he answered. Officer Tamilio put his badge around his neck. He got his bullhorn from the back seat. He kissed Mrs. Officer Tamilio goodbye and said, "Am I off to make the world a safer place?" "I am," he answered himself. "I am most definitely off to make the world a safer place." Mrs. Officer Tamilio waved goodbye. Mercy discovered that there was hot buttered popcorn everywhere. Every car had big buckets of popcorn. Every car had open windows. The popcorn was buttery. The popcorn was crunchy. The popcorn was delicious. Mercy helped herself. She helped herself again and again. People screamed. People laughed. People fainted. Mercy kept eating. In the meantime, Mr. Watson and Frank returned to the convertible with several bottomless buckets of popcorn. Mrs. Watson was crying. "My darling, my dear," said Mr. Watson, "what is wrong?" "It's a tragedy," said Mrs. Watson. I wouldn't exactly call it a tragedy," said Eugenia Lincoln. "Mercy is missing," said Stella. "Don't worry," said Mr. Watson. "We'll find her." "I'll wait here, if you don't mind," said Eugenia Lincoln. She helped herself to some hot buttered popcorn. Leroy Ninkers heard people screaming about monsters. He heard people shouting about pigs. Leroy saw a woman with a net run past the concession stand. "What are you trying to catch?" said Leroy. "A pig," said the woman with the net. "A pig?" said Leroy. "That's right," said the woman. "You're not going to catch livestock with a net," he said. "What you need is a lasso. Yippee-i-o!" Mr. Watson and Mrs. Watson and Stella and Frank and Baby shouted, Mercy! 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 Should you remain calm? Officer Tamilio asked. You most definitely should remain calm. At the ticket counter, Beatrice Lipoloni took off her glasses and put them back on. Wonky, said Beatrice. Wonky in the extreme. Maybe it's some kind of emergency. Maybe I should call for help. Beatrice adjusted her glasses. She picked up the phone. She dialed the fire department. Mercy was having a wonderful time. She had consumed a large amount of butter popcorn, and now people were chasing after her. Mercy loved to chase. She ran faster. She kicked up her heels. Gotcha! Shouted Francine Paulette. Francine Paulette netted Officer Tamilio. Yippee-i-o! Shouted Leroy. He lassoed Francine Paulette. Fascinating, said Alfred P. Tompkins. Simply fascinating. There was the sound of a siren. There was the flash of lights. A fire truck pulled into the bijou. Things seem to be out of control, said the fireman named Ned. It's the movies, said the fireman named Lorenzo. They make people crazy. Actually, said a man who was standing next to Ned, I think the pig is making people crazy. Holy smokes, I know that pig, said Lorenzo. It's the toast-loving pig from Decawoo Drive. I'll tell you, said the man standing next to Ned, this is way better than any movie I've ever seen. It's all been fascinating, simply fascinating. I guess it's time for us to come to the rescue, said Ned. We should do what only firemen can do, said Lorenzo. Ned and Lorenzo took off running. Ned and Lorenzo ran very fast. Ned and Lorenzo caught up to Mercy. Hey, said Ned, how's about some toast? Yes, said Lorenzo. How's about some toast with a great deal of butter? Mercy stopped running. Mercy sat down. Mercy thought very hard. Toast sounded like an excellent idea to her. Toast always sounded like an excellent idea to her. Ned sat down next to Mercy. He put his arm around her. Oh, said Mrs. Watson, you found her. How will we ever be able to thank you for helping us locate our darling, our dear, said Mr. Watson. Well, said Ned, I'm a little hungry. Toast would be good, said Lorenzo. Toast, said Mrs. Watson. I would love to make some toast. Who else would like some toast? We never did get to see that movie, said Stella. I wonder if it ended happily, said Frank. Well, said Mrs. Watson, here we are, all of us together. And we're all eating toast, said Mrs. Watson. I can't imagine a happier ending than that, said Mrs. Watson. It's the happiest possible ending, said Baby Lincoln. It's almost like a love story. It is a love story, said Mr. Watson. And it's very inspirational, said Mrs. Watson. The end. We don't eat our classmates. Penelope Rex was nervous. It's not every day a little T-Rex starts school. What are my classmates going to be like? Will they be nice? How many teeth will they have? This was very important. Penelope's mom bought her a new backpack with ponies on it. Ponies were Penelope's favorite, because ponies are delicious. Penelope's dad packed her a lunch of 300 tuna sandwiches and 1 apple juice. Finally, the big day came, and Penelope Rex was very surprised to find out that all of her classmates were children. So she ate them, because children are delicious. Penelope Rex, said Mrs. Noodleman, we don't eat our classmates. Please spit them out at once. So she did. It was not the best way to start school. Still, Penelope was determined to have a good first day. She tried hard to make friends at recess. She finger-painted some of her best work. She even saved Griff and Emery a seat at lunch. You can sit here." Penelope started to notice everyone was making friends but her. It was lonely. When she got home, her dad asked about her first day of school. "I didn't make any friends," Penelope cried. "None of the children wanted to play with me." "Penelope Rex," her father asked, "did you eat your classmates?" "Well, maybe sort of, just a little bit." "Sometimes it's hard to make friends," said her dad, "especially if you eat them. You see, Penelope, children are the same as us on the inside, just tastier." That gave Penelope a lot to think about. The next day Penelope tried really hard. But poor Penelope, she could not stop herself from eating her classmates. "Mrs. Noodleman, Penelope ate William Amato again." And they were all afraid of her. Except Walter. Walter was a goldfish. So Penelope tried to make friends with him. "Will you be my friend?" "Jump!" The fish bit her. "Eee!" cried Penelope. "He's eating my finger! Wah!" Once Penelope found out what it was like to be someone's snack, she lost her appetite for children. She stopped eating her classmates, even when Cece Woodman spilled barbecue sauce all over herself. And soon Penelope made more friends. Now, even when children look especially delicious, she peeks at Walter and remembers what it's like when someone tries to eat you. And Walter, the goldfish, stares right back at her and licks his lips. Because dinosaurs are delicious. The end. Good night, Sierra. You're my baby. I love you.